In this video, we are going to talk about VeChain, some of its recent price action, the important support and resistance areas, and where we can expect the price of VeChain to go in the next few days and weeks. So we'll be looking at the weekly chart, and what you can see here is that since late 2024, VeChain has been continuously dumping, really without any major rallies. VeChain just kept on dumping even in periods where the rest of the crypto market was performing very well. Even when Bitcoin was getting to new all-time highs, VeChain was still continuing to be in a downtrend, and it is continuing to lose every single support area that it had, and it is now getting very close to its all-time low from all the way back in 2020. VeChain is currently right at this level of support that it had from all the way back in 2019. This is the very last area of support before the all-time low. We've seen VeChain start to consolidate and slow down with the dump in the last couple of months, and then in the last few days we've seen VeChain actually start to get a pretty aggressive rally. This is of course following Bitcoin getting a very aggressive rally of its own. Bitcoin went up over 20% in just a couple of days, and of course Ethereum followed it as well as many other altcoins. So VeChain is no different, and it has gotten a very significant rally in the last few days. Although considering how small of a market cap VeChain has and how volatile it is compared to Bitcoin, this rally is not actually that large compared to the rally by Bitcoin and Ethereum. And as you can see here on the weekly chart, it is a relatively small move compared to things that we have seen from VeChain in the past. Also guys, if you are enjoying these videos and you want more updates about VeChain as well as other altcoins and the rest of the crypto market, make sure to subscribe. It helps the channel way more than you know, and it allows me to continue making these videos. So if you're getting any value from these updates and you want to see more of them, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And now let's continue with the analysis of VeChain. So now zooming in on just the last couple of years for VeChain, we can see that despite this rally being quite significant, this is a rally of over 20% in just a couple of days, it is still not even close to breaking the downtrend for VeChain. It is still significantly lower than the previous high from all the way back in May. Back then VeChain was at around 0.008, and it is currently still below 0.006. And because of this very aggressive rally by Bitcoin in the last few days, we have actually seen the RSI by Bitcoin get to extremely overheated levels. On the 4-hour chart, we've seen it reach over 90. It reached one of the highest levels that it had of all time, and in the last day or so, we haven't really seen it continue to rally. So I would expect the rally by Bitcoin to slow down and probably for it to get a bit of a correction, at least in the short term, in the next few days. And considering that, I would also expect VeChain to follow it and probably dump a little bit from here, and I wouldn't expect this rally to continue for much more, at least for VeChain. Even if Bitcoin does continue to perform well, I'm a lot less optimistic about VeChain compared to Bitcoin. VeChain is still very clearly in a downtrend. It is still not performing well, and it has been performing very poorly for a very long period of time. So I would probably expect VeChain to continue to not perform so well, probably both in the short and the long term. Even if Bitcoin and the rest of the crypto market do continue to rally, that does not guarantee VeChain continues to rally as well. And as I said, the structure for VeChain is still looking quite weak. And of course, this isn't financial advice whatsoever, but I would personally not bet on VeChain. I think this is still a period to mostly be into Bitcoin and Ethereum. And now there is a lot of discussion about whether the bottom for the Bitcoin bear market is already in or not. I can't really be sure whether it is or not, but I think that if it is not in yet, then it is probably close to it being in, and the bottom for Bitcoin for this bear market will probably be sometime in the next couple of months, probably before the end of 2026. So in my opinion, the right approach at the moment would probably be to avoid being heavy into altcoins, mostly still stick to Bitcoin and maybe some Ethereum, and slowly DCA into Bitcoin, because I do think that the bull market for Bitcoin either already started or it will in the next few months. And both in the short and the long term, as I said, I'm not very optimistic about VeChain. Its structure is still looking very weak. It is still very clearly in a downtrend, and there is nothing invalidating that so far. And even if Bitcoin does continue to rally, I would still expect VeChain to underperform Bitcoin. Historically, for altcoins to start to outperform Bitcoin and for us to get an altcoin season, we first need to see Bitcoin getting into new all-time highs, followed by Ethereum also getting into new all-time highs. And despite some of the very impressive rallies by Bitcoin and Ethereum in the last few days, this is still very far away from being the scenario in the market. And both Bitcoin and Ethereum are still significantly below their all-time high. Obviously, combined with what I said previously about an altcoin season requiring Bitcoin and Ethereum first getting into new all-time highs, another parameter to look at is this chart, total 3 minus USDT against Bitcoin. This is basically a chart that shows the ratio of the entire crypto market, excluding Bitcoin and Ethereum, the blue chips, against Bitcoin. This shows how altcoins are performing compared to Bitcoin. And historically, for us to get an altcoin season like we've seen back in 2021 as well as in 2017, what we first need to see, combined with obviously Bitcoin and Ethereum getting to new all-time highs, is this chart getting to this area of support around 0.26. We've never seen a major altcoin season happen before this chart goes all the way down to that area of support, and really there is no reason for me to expect anything different this cycle. In the previous cycle in 2025, we've never really seen a major altcoin season, and we've also not seen this chart go all the way down to the support area. So this support area leading to the altcoin season has never been invalidated in 3 cycles now, and currently this chart is at 0.37. So even though we can get some rallies by altcoins even there, I would not expect really a major altcoin season like we've seen in previous cycles until we see this chart go all the way down to the support area. And in my opinion, this will not happen until we see Bitcoin rally much further, and as I said, get into new all-time highs. I would expect Bitcoin to continue to outperform most altcoins, which would lead to this chart going further down. And then once Bitcoin is actually in all-time highs, after it has been outperforming most altcoins for a while, this chart will continue to go down to the support area. And then once that happens, we could maybe start to consider an actual altcoin season. But at the moment, both of these criteria are not met, so I would not expect an altcoin season anytime soon. And as I said, I would mostly stick to being into Bitcoin and Ethereum at the moment. So now let's look at the page of VeChain on CoinMarketCap. What we can see here is the social sentiment first of all. So this is a very bullish sentiment for VeChain, which as I said before, I don't really agree with. I'm quite bearish on VeChain both in the short and the long term. As I said, I would probably expect the rally by Bitcoin to slow down and it probably to get a bit of a correction. And if that does happen, I would expect VeChain to get an even larger correction. And also in the long term, VeChain still has an absolutely horrible structure despite the recent rally, and it is still very clearly in a downtrend. So I would expect it to at the very least underperform Bitcoin and Ethereum, and probably even lose against the dollar as well, although that isn't as guaranteed, because if Bitcoin does get a rally, then VeChain could hold on and perform well compared to the dollar, but at the very least I would expect it to underperform Bitcoin. And now let's look at the total crypto fear and greed index, which is actually inside greed, getting close to extreme greed. The fear and greed has been absolutely skyrocketing in the last week, with it being under 40 just a couple of weeks ago, and now getting all the way up nearly to extreme greed. We've actually seen it in extreme fear just a couple of months ago back in June. So you can see that the sentiment in the crypto market has been moving very quickly. And as I said, I would expect this to probably go down a bit as the rally by Bitcoin cools down a bit. I can't be too sure about whether the absolute bottom for this bear market for Bitcoin is already in or not, but I do think that it is either in or it will be in the next couple of months. I think that we are probably in a period where we are going to transition from the bear market into the bull market, probably sometime around this period in the second half of 2026. But I would expect the fear and greed to probably go down a bit into the neutral area in the next couple of weeks. At the very least, it could even go significantly below that if Bitcoin does actually dump a lot further, even down below 60k, and gets into a new low for this bear market. But even if that does happen, as I said, I would expect Bitcoin to eventually, sometime in the next few months, to start with its bull market if it hasn't already started. So the fear and greed could fluctuate a lot, but I wouldn't take it too much into consideration. But again, of course, this is not financial advice whatsoever. And now finally, let's look at the altcoin season index. This basically shows how well altcoins are performing compared to Bitcoin. This is currently at 40, which is slightly into Bitcoin season, and it shows that Bitcoin has been outperforming most altcoins. Again, just like I showed you on the chart of total 3 minus USDT against Bitcoin, Bitcoin is outperforming most altcoins slightly, and I would expect this to continue probably in the long term, usually both in bear market and at the beginning of a bull market. And really Bitcoin outperforms most altcoins for the vast majority of the time in the crypto market. Really, there are only some very small periods where we actually get an altcoin season and altcoins outperform Bitcoin. This is the exception to the rule. Usually this happens in the later stages of a bull market, which currently we are not in. This is either the end of a bear market or the very start of a bull market. In my opinion, we are definitely not at the end of a bull market. So as I said, for many reasons, I'm definitely not expecting an altcoin season anytime soon, at least not a sustainable one. Of course, as I said, we can get some rallies here and there, and there can be some exceptions of altcoins that outperform Bitcoin, but this is definitely not going to be the norm in my opinion. And as I said, I don't think that VeChain could really be one of them. Of course, anything could happen, but I am definitely not very optimistic about VeChain. So guys, that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it and you want more updates about VeChain as well as other altcoins and the rest of the crypto market, make sure to subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.